All righty, let's get started here. Just a few announcements before we begin class. Remember the men's softball league coming up for this summer. The first game will be the week of April the 18th. If you want to play, get in touch with Peyton Cole, and the cost per player is $50. The Windsong Church of Christ is offering a Ladies' Day on April the 23rd from 9 to 2, and there will be brunch provided and childcare provided. The Paragould Children's Home will be here April the 25th to pick up food, and you can drop off the following items: Miracle Whip, salad dressing, peanut butter, jelly, instant rice, cake mix, frosting, Jell-O mix, pudding mix, vanilla extract, baking soda. Those who've been sick or had surgery, Jay Schock had heart surgery. Remember, Jay used to go here several years ago, him and his wife. He had heart surgery this past Monday. Everything went exactly as planned, and he's doing well. He's in recovery. He's in St. Vincent's in Little Rock, but he cannot have visitors at this time. Julie Broyles, who is with the Bible English School Training Center in Cambodia, has asked us to continue praying for her teenage granddaughter, Gracie. She has spina bifida. She was finally able to have her surgery this past Tuesday. We just got this email from her that it went as good as it could go, and based on the neurosurgeon's preliminary test, Gracie should be able to walk, and so they praise God for those answered prayers for them. Terry Harold, some of you remember him, used to go here, had surgery April the 8th due to some complications from a previous surgery. He's at Baptist Medical Center in Little Rock, and he can't have visitors right now. And Travis just got a text a little bit ago saying he's not doing well. He's on the ventilator. I quickly read through there, and running a fever, and so he's having quite a bit of trouble, so we need to remember him and Nadine. Okay, we're going to begin chapter 7 tonight in the book of Daniel. I know you're excited, get all these visions and everything all psyched out here. Remember, our theme is to be a praying person like Daniel prayed. He prayed often as the example that he gave us. And so we spend time with the Lord each day. So Daniel 7, and the theme that I picked for this chapter was "My spirit was distressed" from Daniel 7:15. And if I had seen the things that Daniel saw, I'd be distressed. I'd be distressed too, all kinds of stuff. And so it'd be very intimidating to see all that. We've mentioned this a couple of times. The chapters are not in a chronological order. This is just my personal opinion. I think Daniel did this for the first 6 chapters, he showed God's sovereignty and that how he was able to accomplish his will and help Daniel advance in the kingdom of Babylon. That sets up so these prophecies and visions and things that he's going to see in the second, that he's going to share with us, that we can be assured if God was able to accomplish all the things that he accomplished in the first 6 chapters, then he will certainly be able to accomplish the things that are prophesied in these last 6. So that's my opinion of why he did this, but you can be thinking about that in your personal ideas. Remember, as I said last week, this chapter is closely related or tied to chapter 2. So I asked you to read chapter 2 and chapter 7 this week, so I hope you were able to do that. Whatever we decide or talk about in these chapters, they need to harmonize because they are closely related. Something that I do when I'm trying to understand a prophecy or a vision such as these is I'll go to the end of the vision and look at it and see what the conclusion was. It's kind of like going to the end of a novel and to see who the bad guy was, who the killer, or whatever. But I go to the end, look at it, and then I go back through the visions along to see if I can put together the pieces that make sense with what I think the end is. And if it doesn't make sense, then I need to go back to the end and come up with another idea. But that's just the way that I do it. It's something you may consider. Everybody's going to have their own way as they study and read through the prophecies. Another difference, in the first half of the book, Daniel did the interpretation for the people, for the king. In this part of the book, he has to have interpretation made for him. Did you have your hand up?
Well, you were saying that I approached one of those who were standing by and began to ask him the exact meaning of all this.
Okay.
Doesn't there say who it was?
No, it doesn't tell us, but we're not there yet, Ernest. But yes, it doesn't say it doesn't identify by name who that person is. Okay. Daniel is describing these future events, and the question I always have on these kind of things is, if that's Babylon, why didn't he just say this beast is Babylon? Well, sometimes he does and sometimes he doesn't, but it's sometimes I think that it's as Jesus said about the parables, and I gave you the reference in Matthew 13, are our eyes open to the Word? Are our eyes willing to spend time in the Word? And it takes time and effort to spend time and meditate and think about these prophecies. It's not something that we will get on the first go-round. It's just there are certain scriptures that are going to be more difficult to understand, and the scriptures are living and breathing, and so we get something out of them every time that we read, maybe something entirely new, and I think that's part of what's going on. One of the things that the authors of the Truth for Today commentary said that I thought was very pertinent says, if we dwell on trying to understand each and every detail in each and every vision and prophecy, he said it could make us fall into a well of deep speculation and therefore drown. And I agree with him on that. There's some things that are generalities. Also, Daniel is putting in human words spiritual things. And that is not always a word-for-word thing. It's kind of like translating Hebrew to English. It's not always word for word. Daniel is trying to describe something for us that he's seen that's entirely spiritual. And so he's having to do the best that he can on that, even though he is inspired. We're not, and sometimes we're not going to understand those things. So, as we get into the text, the first... there's really just one vision. It's just over and over and over again in this. So this vision in verses 1 through 8, and he talks about in the first year of Belshazzar, he saw a dream in verse 1, and he saw it and he wrote it down so that he could remember it and think about it. He said he saw the great sea, and there was a stirring in the great sea, and 4 great beasts came up out of the sea. And there was a beast that was like a lion, had wings of an eagle, and he talks about the wings being plucked, and it stood on its feet like a man. And then next was a bear, and it was raised up on one side and had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. And then the next one was like a leopard, had 4 wings like a bird, and also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. And he says, and then there was a 4th beast, and he calls this one dreadful and terrifying and extremely strong. So this one terrified Daniel when he saw it. And he said it had large iron teeth. It devoured and crushed and trampled down the remainder of the beast with its feet. It was different from them, and it had 10 horns. And while I was thinking about that, another horn came up and tore 3 of the first horns out by the roots, tore them out. And this horn possessed eyes like a man and a mouth uttering great boasts. So if I saw all that in the middle of the night, I would be stirred up, a little concerned about that. I might be concerned about my sanity, for one thing. But as he saw this, and he's seeing all this, so let's kind of break it down or outline it. When you think about the seas being stirred up, what image does that tell? What image does that give you? A storm. There's lots going on. All right. Then he sees these 4 beasts. So there's a lot going on. The seas are stirred up. Then there's a lion with the eagle's wings. And Nebuchadnezzar And the kingdom of Babylon in Jeremiah, more than one place in Jeremiah, but I've given you this reference, he's described as an eagle and a lion. That's one of his descriptions, and that how fast and how destructive he and the Babylonians were against the children of Israel. So that's an idea there. Then there's the bear raised on one side with 3 ribs in his mouth. The second kingdom, and remember the second kingdom was the Persians from chapter 2. It was a combined kingdom of the Medes and the Persians. The Persians were a little more elevated, you might say, or that they were more in power of that kingdom, and that may indicate, and I'm going to say may a lot of times, it may indicate that that's why the bear is raised up on 3 on one side. The 3 ribs that are in its mouth. Now, we're going to go into some detail on this later, but I want to give you this summary as we go through. So there's 3 ribs in his mouth. There were 3 major kingdoms that the Persians captured. That was the Lydians, the Babylonians, and the Egyptians. Then there's a leopard. The third beast, or the third part of the vision in chapter 2, were the Greeks, Alexander the Great. And here we have him as a leopard with 4 wings and 4 heads. What do you remember about Alexander the Great? Yeah. He said, what am I going to do now? And how fast did he conquer that part of that Middle Eastern? How long did it take him? Do y'all know? Yeah, he was in his 20s when he started, and it took him about 10 years, and he wiped everybody out. He was outnumbered and outgunned, but he was a whole lot smarter. He was a really good general, and he outfoxed them. He outwarred them, I guess you might say. Or he was more dastardly than those dastardly guys, right, George? Yeah, he was. But anyway, this leopard kind of gives you that image of this third part of the statue from chapter 2, and here's the third beast. The 4 head and the wings also allude to speed also. His kingdom was broken up into 4 parts, and that may indicate why there was 4 heads there. Then the dreadful, terrifying, strong 4th beast with iron teeth and 10 horns. Notice that Daniel did not describe this as an animal. It was badder than all that. I guess it was just badder than all the animals that were out there. Nothing could touch it, and it had iron teeth. In the statue, what were the legs made of that was the Roman Empire? Iron. And then the feet were of iron and clay, but the legs were of iron, and here we have iron teeth. Then you got this little horn that grows up and pulls the 3 others out by the roots. So what would you say about this little horn? He's a bad old dude, right? Yeah. I mean, you pull something up out by the roots. And so that's the terrifying, and I can understand why Daniel was terrified himself, probably. I want to make reference to Revelation chapter 13, and we'll do this occasionally. John, in the visions that he sees, in chapter 13, he sees a great beast coming up out of the sea. Sound familiar? And this beast has parts like a leopard, like a lion, and a bear. I don't know if that's coincidence, or if it's supposed to be a coincidence, or if it's an accidental coincidence, but that's what John saw as compared to what Daniel saw, and I think that's interesting. And I'm not going to, at this particular point, I'm not going to make a conclusion about that, but I want you to have that in the back of your mind. So then the next thing, he says he kept looking, and he'll say that a couple of times here as he's writing this down. He says, I kept looking. I mean, how could you take your eyes off of it? I mean, it's like watching a train wreck or something. I mean, you can't not watch once you've started watching. So he kept looking, and then thrones were set up. And the Ancient of Days took his seat, and his vesture was like white snow, and his head was like pure wool. His throne was ablaze with flames. His wheels were burning fire, and a river fire was flowing before him. Thousands upon thousands were attending him. Myriads upon myriads were standing before him. I mean, too numerous to count. And the books were opened. What does when the judge, whoever's been in court, when the judge walks in, you stand up, right? And you stand up until what? Till he sits down, because he's the judge. And that's the way it is. So people in supreme positions of power, they are sitting. And you might be allowed to sit if he says so, but in our civil courts, when the judge walks in, everybody stands up until he sits down and he says, you can sit down now. And that's kind of the picture here. So it's a judgment. Then in verse 11, there's boastful words, which this little horn was speaking, and I kept looking. And the beast was slain, and its body was destroyed and given to the burning fire. And the rest of the beasts, their dominion was taken away. But an extension of life was granted to them for an appointed period of time. I can't imagine what's going through Daniel's mind at this point. He's not asked the guy for the interpretation yet, Ernest. But I mean, all of this stuff that he's seen is just unbelievable. So who's the Ancient of Days? Yeah, I mean, if myriads upon myriads are standing before him and thousands upon thousands are attending him, he obviously is of supreme power of some kind. And so when I think about describing this scene, I mean, it's got to be, when you talk about myriads and myriads of people, I mean, it's probably people as far as Daniel can see are people out before this Ancient of Days. More than he can take in, more than he can see, and more than he can understand. So what happened to the beast with the big boastful words? He was destroyed. This idea of the first three beasts were given an extension of time. I'll throw something out for your consideration. God uses the world to accomplish his will, and we all know that and we all understand it. We may not understand exactly how he does things, but we know that Babylon was there to punish Israel. And we know that Jeremiah said after the 70 years, they're going to be punished. And so all of that's going on, but what did the Babylonians do for the Jews? It wasn't all bad. They let them thrive. They flourished under the protection of the Babylonian kingdom. They were allowed to thrive. It's where they started using synagogues. Their population grew, and so they were allowed to stay in one part of the country and stay together, which was important to maintain the genealogy of the Christ, because these were the Jews. And so Babylon unknowingly, unwittingly accomplished God's will in preserving the Jews, even though they're the ones that took them out of Jerusalem, destroyed the city, burned the temple down, tore the walls down, killed lots of people. There was a purpose in all of that. God said they had to be punished because they were not being obedient. They were punished, and after the Babylonians accomplished that, they were punished after the 70 years. The Persians, and I'm thinking about these three kingdoms, that their life was extended for a little while. What did the Persians do for the Jews? Well, they let them go. Remember, the Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, and he let the people go under Ezra and Nehemiah. What else did he do for them? What did he pay for? Yes, for the temple. He basically paid for all of that and provided protection of his army so that they could do those things. He provided that umbrella. So there was good that he did on behalf of the Jews. Did he know he was doing good and helping God accomplish his will? I don't know. I do not know. What do you mean? How did he do that?
Now, why would he do it? Because there's a prophecy.
There is some thinking that Daniel said to Cyrus, hey, by the way, you're in this book. Isaiah said 150 years ago, you, by name, were going to turn the people loose. I don't know. We're not told that that's what happened. Alexander, as he came through, one of the things that he provided was a universal language for this entire part of the world, which is very important for the spreading of the gospel later on. He also, according to Josephus, and I've given you the reference on your handout, when he was coming towards Jerusalem, he was mad at the Jews because they refused to turn around and help him fight the Persians. And he was mad. Tyre had refused to help him, and he burned that town to the ground, literally. There was nothing. And the high priest comes out and meets him and asks him to not destroy Jerusalem, and he does not. And he also, according to Josephus, who is not an inspired man, he is a historian, a man, but he said that he pointed out this prophecy of Daniel that there would be this guy who was the leopard who would come and destroy all these people, and he kind of said, well, that's got to be me. And so he spared Jerusalem. We don't know how all of these pieces fit together, if they even fit together. But as you look back, take a step back and look at the whole of how God's will was accomplished to preserve his people and keep them intact for the coming of the Messiah, which is the whole story. The story of the Bible is Christ is coming. What's the next part of the Bible? Christ is here and he's coming back. That's the Bible. And in the Old Testament, everything that happens is to work towards Christ is coming. Then Christ is here, and the rest of the New Testament is he's coming back. And here are the expectations that he has for us. Okay. He established his kingdom, yes. So you've got all this going on here. So Daniel is still puzzled, and he sees all this. So then he says, I kept looking, because he can't turn away in verse 13 and 14. Then there's a person who comes out who is like a son of man. Most of your translations that you're looking at will have son of man capitalized. Why? It's deity. That's indication of deity. It will even say, even in most translations, even if it uses the term he, but he's talking about God, the he will be capitalized also. But Son of Man is capitalized. Now there's some translations, some printers don't do that, but it should be, most of the translations do. And he came up to the Ancient of Days, was presented before him. So who's in charge? If you're presented to someone, who's the most elevated person? The person you're being presented to. So he's being presented, so the Ancient of Days. And to him was given dominion, glory, and a kingdom, that all people and the nations and men of every language might serve him. His dominion was an everlasting dominion, which will not pass away, and his kingdom was one which will not be destroyed. How does this kingdom contrast with the kingdoms we've been talking about? The Persians and the Medes and the Babylonians and the Greeks. What happened to those kingdoms? Pardon? They're all gone. Yeah, they're all gone. And the Romans are gone. They're all gone. But this kingdom that he's talking about that's given to the Son of Man is a everlasting, a forever kingdom. All right. I've given, there's a couple of references that I gave you, Luke 1, 32 through 33, and 1 Timothy 6, 15 and 16. To me, it really speaks to that Christ is going to be royalty and deity. When the angel came and spoke to Mary, he said, you're going to have a son. And she's like, how's that going to happen? I'm a virgin. And he says, you're going to have a son from the Holy Spirit. The Lord God will give him the throne of his father David. He will reign over the house of Jacob forever. And his kingdom will have no end. Mary is told that before Jesus is even born, that his kingdom. And then Paul calls him King of Kings, Lord of Lords, and the only sovereign. He is over this kingdom that the Ancient of Days has given him. This term, Son of Man, Jesus himself used the term Son of Man about 80 times in the 4 gospel accounts. There's only one gospel, there's just 4 accounts written about the same events. In those 4 accounts, Jesus called himself the Son of Man about 80 times or so. You may get a different count if you do your own research, but that's what I came up with. When Jesus, at the conclusion of his earthly ministry, and he's about to ascend up to the Ancient of Days, what does he tell the disciples in Matthew 28? What authority has been given to him? All authority has been given. He tells them, I have all authority, and that's in Matthew 28:18. So naturally, Daniel has seen all this, and in verse 15, my spirit was distressed. Absolutely. He is human, just like he says, the visions in my mind kept alarming me. So here, Ernest, he approaches one of those who's standing by. There's those myriads of myriads and thousands upon thousands, and he walks up to one of them and says, I need to understand what I'm seeing here, because I do not understand. And he asked him, in verse 16, the exact meaning of all this. So he told me and made known to me the interpretation of these things. He said, these great beasts, there's 4, are 4 kings who will arise from the earth. But the saints of the highest one will receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever, for all ages to come. Who is the highest one that we've seen in the first 15 verses? The kingdom that will last forever and ever. The Son of Man's kingdom, yes, that that the Ancient of Days gave him. So we're getting down to who's in charge and what's going to last and these kind of things. So Daniel he starts getting his explanation. There's 2 views, and I'll share these with you, and I promise you at the end we will summarize this, because I don't want to go down rabbit holes and get lost in every detail about the flames of this fire and the flames of that fire and the wheel on the throne, all of that. We are not going to know what those things mean. But there are 2 views. One is the kingdom that the saints will inherit are the spiritual kingdom. Rex Turner, in his commentary, he thinks that because of the goodness and righteousness of the Christians in the first century, they are responsible for the destruction of the Roman Empire, based on that they could not be wiped out. And you have the page in his commentary. You can read through that yourself if you want to. But those are the two views. I have my opinion, but it's not important at this particular point. But those are the 2 views. In verse 17, we are confirmed that the 4th beast is a kingdom, because the man who's talking to Daniel says so. It's a kingdom. All right. So Daniel, naturally, the human part of him, of all the things that he's seen so far, which one do you think he wants to know the most about? Well, I mean, which of those beasts do you think has gotten his attention and he wants to know the most about? The 4th one. Why? Because it has scared him literally to death. He said it's terrifying. It's awesome. It tramples everything. So, yeah, and the fact that there's a little horn comes up out of there and rips 3 of them out and takes over. That would get my attention, and it got Daniel's attention. So it's like, at this point, he doesn't go back to these others, but he sure wants to know about this 4th one, because, I mean, that guy's bad. And so he wants to know. So I desired, in verse 19, the exact meaning of the 4th beast, which was different from all the others, exceedingly dreadful, teeth of iron, claws of bronze, devoured, crushed, and trampled down the remainder with its feet. And the meaning of the 10 horns, and the other horn which came up, which 3 of them fell. He says, I kept looking in verse 21, and that horn was waging war with the saints and overpowering them. He sees this little horn attacking God's people, and it's winning. Right at that particular point, it's winning. And so, yes, this is terrifying to him. Then in verse 22, until the Ancient of Days comes. The little horn's winning until the Ancient of Days come. And judgment was passed in favor of the saints. And the saints took possession of the kingdom. And that's why I think Rex Turner believes that he's talking about the Roman kingdom. So, Daniel's pressed for more information on that. The other horn rages war with the saints. A principle that was emphasized by there's 3 authors of the Daniel commentary of Truth for Today. And one of the main points that they keep zeroing in is that God will only allow the saints to be persecuted for a period of time. He will not allow it to continue unabated forever. He will not allow it. And really, Old Testament history shows us that, and New Testament history. The persecution of the saints that happened in the first century went for a while, and then it stopped. Then, he said, they recognize that whoever that persecutor is, or whatever that persecutor is punished. God will not allow them to do what they did and not pay for it. He will not allow it. Jeremiah foretold in Jeremiah 25:12, there will be 70 years are completed. I will punish the king of Babylon and that nation for their iniquity in the land of the Chaldeans, and I will make it an everlasting desolation. God will destroy those who persecute his people. Did God allow the Egyptians to persecute the Israelites for a period of time?
400 years?
Well, not the whole 400 years, but for a period of time when the new Pharaoh came along. But that Pharaoh that did that, he was punished, wasn't he? He was brought up and he was destroyed because he persecuted God's people. And we will see that theme through here, and Daniel emphasizes that. God is only going to allow so much for so long, and then he's going to say, that's it. And he will rectify the situation. Okay. So as Daniel goes along here, I'm not sure we'll finish all of chapter 7, but so if we don't worry, we'll just pick up next week where we leave off. So this person is telling him the 4th beast will be the 4th kingdom. It will be different. The 10 horns, it talks about they will be 10 kings, and another will rise after them, and he'll be different, and he'll subdue the 3 kings. In verse 24, he will speak out against the Most High, wear down the saints, and he will intend to make the law say basically what he wants it to say, and it will happen, and they will be given into his hand for a time, times, and half time. And that's a phrase that's used in different places in the Bible. Then the sovereignty and dominion and the greatness of all the kingdoms of the heaven will be given to the people of the saints of the highest one, and this kingdom will be an everlasting kingdom. So again, Daniel is told it's only going to be for a period of time, and then there will be payment for what has happened to his people. He will not allow it to go unchecked forever. So then in verse 28, it says, I was greatly alarmed, my face grew pale, and I kept the matter to myself. I can imagine if he went to the palace and said, guess what I saw? Yeah. Yeah. All right, so let's talk about this. Let's start kind of trying to bring all this home here. In verse 23, there will be a 4th kingdom. It will devour the whole earth and crush it. It'll have the 10 horns or 10 kings. There will be another horn, another king, subdue the 3 kings, and he will wear down the saints. The saints will be given into his hand for a time, times, and half time. He will be judged, and he will be destroyed forever, is the end of him. The sovereignty and greatness of kingdoms will be given to the people of the saints, and God's kingdom is an everlasting kingdom. So now, just as we try to bring this, kind of summarize this and bring it home, Oren? There we go. I want to compare the chapter 2 and chapter 7. There's Nebuchadnezzar's dream. Right there. Up. Yeah, I was the one doing the pointing, right? Okay, Nebuchadnezzar's dream. Up, go back a slide. All right. Remember from chapter 2, he was the head of fine gold. In Daniel's dream, it was a lion and had the wings of an eagle, and this was the Babylonian Empire. Then there was the second part of the statue that had the chest and arms of silver. And the second beast was a bear. And this is the Medes and the Persians. Okay, let's see. Okay, thank you, Oren. Then next was the belly and thighs of bronze. And this, in this chapter 7, was the leopard. And this is the Greek Empire. And then the legs of iron, which is the Romans. And in Daniel's dream, he sees it's an extremely strong beast, dreadful, terrifying, and this is the Romans. And the next one.
Was that the little horn?
No, the little horn's coming up. All right, and then the last thing in Nebuchadnezzar's dream, there was the stone cut out of the mountain, becoming a great mountain, filling the whole earth, and this would happen during the reign of this fourth kingdom. Then this 11th horn, which is part of the last kingdom, will speak out against the saints. All kingdoms will be given, and all kingdoms will be given to the saints. This horn will be judged. This is the Lord's church, and so that's the comparison. That's all. The only thing I think that is important to get out of here is that the end is the same. The end is the same. At the end of these visions, God's kingdom is established and it lasts forever. We could spend a lot of time in those, and I think that I have a partial understanding of that, and as you do in your personal study, you may come to some ideas yourself. Okay, okay. Now, this is who's the little horn. There are two. I read quite a few commentaries, but the two that I think do the best job are Rex Turner, who wrote a commentary, Daniel. He's a member of the church, wrote this commentary, I think in the 80s, and then the Truth for Today commentary. They are pretty close in their thoughts. In the Truth for Today, he believes that Augustus here is the first one, and from there you count 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, and here you go to Domitian. And he says this is the little horn. I'm just giving so that you have this information. It's not something we need to debate over. These are two very intelligent men that wrote these things, and they have good reasons for saying what they did. Rex Turner, in his commentary, believes that Pompey was actually him, and he goes the same list, but he says this guy was the the little horn. Yeah. And I want you to memorize all those names. And next week there'll be a test.
Well, there's sure some winners in that list.
Yeah, there is. But notice where they do agree is these three guys right here. Both of them say these are the three little horns that were uprooted. And if you look at the dates, both of them say those three guys served all within a 12-month period. They didn't last very long. It's just the only difference they have is who's the one that tore them out by the roots. Yes? It was after Charlemagne. which is a little bit later. And that's an important part that we will get to a discussion on that a little bit. What I'm just driving at is who was the one who caused the most trouble for the Jews. Rex Turner believes that it's Vespasian. He was at Jerusalem, and he was going to attack and put Jerusalem under siege. This was a little bit before AD 70. Nero died. So he wants to be the guy. He wants to be the emperor. So he goes to Rome. And through his finagling and his allies, he became emperor. Titus is his son. He sends Titus back to Jerusalem. And what happened to Jerusalem then? To the ground. The temple was everything. It was destroyed. That's why Rex Turner believes that that's correct. It doesn't matter that much. It's just interesting. And I think that these things are there for us to think about in our private study, the time when we're meditating and studying on the Word, to look at these things and to cause us to study more of the Bible. Under Titus and Vespasian, the church was ravaged. Domitian also persecuted the church, and he even made himself a title of Lord and God, which, yes, the true Lord and God would not be pleased with him doing that. But that's another, you can take that down now, Orrin. Barton Kaufman believes that it's the Roman Church, the Pope. He believes that's the 10th horn, and he is not alone there. There are others that do. But the thing to remember is the fourth beast is the Roman Empire, and it's important to agree on that and know that. Why? Well, they build towards it, but what happened during the Roman Empire? The church, the eternal kingdom was established, and the reliable scholars all get there. So I'm not going to argue if it's Vespasian or Domitian or whatever. I'm not going to go there. The Pope didn't come along for years afterwards, so I'm not sure why Barton Kaufman, but he is a faithful member of the church and wrote a great commentary, but that's what he believes. There are several others that do. There are two other commenters, Matthew Henry and Dumlow, they're not members of the church, but they wrote good commentaries. They believe that it's Antiochus Epiphanes, and we'll talk about him later. Never, when you're looking for prophecy, don't Google. I mean, you will find anything. There is a religious group in the United States that we are all familiar with, that they believe that the United States is the fourth kingdom with the 10 horns, and that Mr. Trump is the little horn. And they wrote this big opinion. I'm saying that because you can find anything out there. And so, as Jeremiah told the people, it's important who we listen to. And so, going back to the book, these prophecies, and we're going to find out later, verified by Jesus, that some of these prophecies they've already occurred. They've already found out. So, time, and a half time. That's used a bunch. It's used in Revelation, and it's used here.
What does it mean?
That's what we're doing right now. That's probably going to be the rest of our class. Both of these commenters believe that it's 3.5 years. Time, times, and a half time. Was that the second bell? Yes. Okay, I don't even want to start on this. We'll pick up there next week, and then we'll summarize, because remember, the ultimate thing to get from this is that there's going to be a lot going on. Bad things are going to happen. Bad things are going to happen to the church, to the people, to the saints. But who's going to win? That's the message to get. God will reconcile all things. Sometimes he will reconcile all things now. Some of these kingdoms were destroyed and they paid the price then. Some have not paid the price. But God will reconcile and the saints will win. The saints will win. And that's the main message. So we'll kind of we'll talk about times and halftime, and then we'll summarize this chapter at the beginning of class next week. I appreciate the comments and the thoughts you've shared, and you can holler at me later if you got other questions or things that come up. Thanks.